Welcome to Business Over Breakfast. Where's my little remote? There we go, thank you. As we always do, we like to start off with our guest singer representing the Navy League. Janina, would you come up please? In our wonderful national anthem, please.
Yes, we'll try this morning. I'm suffering from a little jet lag from Mesquite, Nevada, and 105-degree heat every day. But please join me in singing the national anthem, which is usually my custom to ask you to sing. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
And by the way, if you've ever been in a Mission Barbecue restaurant about noon, everybody stops what they're doing, including the kitchen staff, and they do just that. They do the national anthem in this place every single day. And if you look around here, you can see the theme, very veteran and military and first responder focused. So for our hosts, please, a big round of applause. Wonderful food as always. Thank you. We just love coming here, so we appreciate you all. And our wonderful sponsors that help things go around for us. AEW, who all we got with us today? All right. We had more signed up. We had some no-shows, huh? All right. I know we had at least 4. All right, you have to be ambassadors. Now the pressure's on. Nobody from Sawyer. Rick? Multi-hatting from Velocity. Where are you? There you are. You're hiding in plain sight. Ned's not here. Brian, always dual hatting, you catch me off guard, buddy. Aero 92 and our wonderful media expert here in front. Nobody from American Air, Belfour, or Stockton with us right now. But we are part of the Michigan Defense Coalition. This is all the nonprofits that basically are advocating for defense in the state of Michigan. Once a month, or once a quarter, we do we call it the Codell Breakfast. So it was actually my time to host it last time around. But the wonderful group that includes now the National Guard Association of Michigan, the National Defense Industrial Association, AUSA, which is the Army Association, I don't remember what it stands for, it's the Army version of us. Who else am I missing there? Women in Defense. So all these organizations cooperate, we do a lot of events together, and it's absolutely wonderful. So these are all of our partners and sponsors, and they really do make the world go round. All right, everybody on the AFA team, raise your hands. Most of them are wearing their cool shirts, except me. And Tamara, she's sporting the denim look today and everything. But and if y'all don't know Tamara, outside of the Cyber Patriot, if you've been here before and heard her talk about that, she's also in our first ever Michigan individual who is in the Emerging Leaders. I keep wanting to use a different E word right there. Emerging Leaders program. So she's getting to learn all about AFA at the national level, things they do, programs and everything else. So she's going to teach me at some point. But, yep. All right, I'm glad Ron didn't make it here today because I forget to change that logo. He is no longer DC3S, but they have the same logo that just says Ron and Mary Lamparter. And then, of course, you all had a chance to meet Janina when she came up, Navy League. So we're all about joint service stuff around here. elected officials. I know we have a county commissioner with us. Don, thank you as always. I think that's it today. Oh, staffers, we do have from John James staff. We have James from John James, not confusing at all. I think that's it today. Actually, there's a lot going on. If you're wondering, normally this place is pretty full, but I know the Grayling VIP Day and Pass Review and everything's going on. That drug a lot of people up there. We were just talking how the ROTC summer camp is going on. So Josh Arns, from the U of M, they're all down somewhere south where it's hot, keeping ungodly hours and stuff like that right now. But anyway, wonderful. Thank you all for being here and being part of this. We already talked about my team. All right, looking ahead, what we have coming up next month, Colonel Leah Volker. I don't just realize that the picture I grabbed for her, she's a captain in that picture. But she is currently the Air Refueling Group Commander out at Selfridge, and I think she's still wearing a title up in Lansing right now. But she's a future leader. We're going to get to hear a lot about what's going on at Selfridge and out at the base. The month after that, right now, tentatively, we're waiting to get it in ink, is we're going to do a lunch at Starbase on Selfridge. So we'll have the bit where you have to get registered to come on base, but to go out there to Starbase, and we'll get to see the STEM education program and the wonderful things going on there that we're looking at trying to support. The issue right now, if you remember, we've talked this before in this forum, is that their funding, which comes through the Department of Defense, has been kind of questioned. They actually shut down for a couple months. So hopefully in the long run, they're going to be viable, and we're looking at helping them actually expand what they're going to do in the future. Jump ahead a couple months, and we have this guy named Rick Snyder who's going to show up here. He's my former boss. He is the Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard here in Michigan, former Governor Rick Snyder, who's very involved with both cyber stuff right now as well as educational initiatives. So that's what we have, at least looking forward right now, with more information to come on that. My stopping points about the air. One more thing. We did have a flyer out here. Okay, on the tables. All right, you have the thing here about the Team Up Academy. Where are you? If you have any questions, over here against the wall. But the flyers are right here with information. Thank you for putting these out. So if you have any questions, that's where you're going to go. Not to me, because I don't know. All right. But our wonderful U.S. Air Force is the smallest, oldest, and least ready that it has ever been in its history. These are our stopping points. If you want to get into this discussion, I'd be glad to explain to you and show you objectively exactly what we mean by all this. And yet, at the same time, our primary adversary keeps getting bigger, newer, and more effective with what they're doing. There's a challenge out there right now. And even though we're talking about more money being spent in the Department of Defense, what exactly are we buying? What type of capabilities are we going to have? It would be a great discussion, but what I just wanted to do was throw that out as our standard talking point and foot stomper, that why what we do in the AFA is important. Okay, we could talk about Space Force and everything too, on how they're new, just like when the Marine Corps started. They don't have their own staff. They still use the ROTC programs and officer training for the Air Force, and then they choose the Space Force. There's lots that they don't have integrated, supporting them as a separate service right now. All right, so this great individual. Now I'm going to switch over to the topic I want to talk about. We always do a little bit of an educational thing as we get going. But this guy wrote a book, and in this book, he talks about that quote right there. And I think a lot of people know that quote. All right, and you probably know that individual, probably not by his face, because you probably don't keep his picture around, but he wrote a book. His name is Sun Tzu, all right, on war. It's a very commonly quoted book and everything else. So as we start today talking about weather, and that's exactly what I want to talk about to lead into our guest speaker, if you keep reading past that passage, keep reading to the next paragraph, which most people don't, look what it says right there. Know the ground, know the weather, and then your victory will be total. So let's talk about weather. As pilots, we get taught, and we almost get a mini PhD in weather. When you go through pilot training and everything else, any type of stuff, because it matters. When you have to take off and land, it's always going to be about wind, it's going to be about cloud decks, you can go on and on. It's very important just to be able to get from point A to point B. But there is so much more to it, and I'm going to just scratch the surface on that here for just a minute. Think for a second. Big storm front comes through. What do we do most of the time at an airport? We go hangar the airplanes, right? We tie them down. We get hunkered down for the storm. What if we knew where these were, and we had all of our bombers and attack airplanes and everything right behind the storm front? So right as the enemy is like trying to hunker down so they're not going to have their airplanes blown away, then we come behind a storm front and blow them away in a different way. In other words, just normal weather type of patterns can affect things. If you watch the old movies, you can remember about Japanese Navy ships going into thunderstorms to hide from their adversaries. Or in World War II, when they said, oh, I'm getting outnumbered or whatever, somebody's about to shoot me, I'll duck into a cloud. All these types of things are the effects that weather can have on our military, whether it's air and space, and we'll jump into that just a little bit more. But really, it's up to the imagination. There you go, just a quote. All these quotes, by the way, the words that I'm putting up on the slides, are directly out of an AFA magazine article from last year that was talking about weather. So let me bop over here. We have to put weather into all of our planning, whether it's the sun cycle, the moon cycles at night, because we use a lot of night vision goggles right now, which are light intensifiers. So it matters what the illumination is at night. You don't want to go out there with a full moon because you're going to be looking like a bug running across the sheet. You want to have the right amount of illumination and then the right kind of weather so that you can see. So when we look at military planning, it's very, very important, not just what the thunderstorms and cloud decks are going to be, but then we have to look at sun, moon, those types of things, because they all play into it. They can't be an afterthought. They have to be brought in from the beginning into that strategic planning. In fact, when you go look at the first Gulf War, it was all about that, the timing, and especially that illumination at night, and what we have to do to make that work. So, the atmosphere, weather, precipitation, humidity, wind, all play into, let's just take an example of a surface-to-air missile, the radar, how far it can look, how accurate is it going to be. All these atmospheric types of conditions can actually help or hurt. And somebody that's trying to go into bad guy land where they have all these defenses, the weather can actually be a shield. It can be something that can help them hide or whatever, depending on the types of radar. So all these come into effect, and we could talk all these different sensors, and certainly infrared, you hear all that all the time, heat-seeking types of things. Well, that dissipates, obviously, when you have high humidity, when you have weather conditions or something like that. So you're not going to be able to see as well. Lastly is when I used to fly, we used an infrared system in the version of the F-16. I started flying diurnal cycle. Am I saying it right?
That's it.
Okay, the heating and cooling of the Earth matters. And we used to talk about the thermal crossover point. And that's where the things heated by the sun would start to cool, and at some point the atmosphere and everything in it would all merge together. So there was a period of time where an infrared picture was actually very difficult. And there were other times with that heating and cooling cycle where it would be very clear, those temperature differentials. So believe it or not, that became a huge thing, as we had to go, this time of night or this time of day is not the time that you'd want to try and do something, because it's going to be difficult for you then to have an accurate picture of what's going on. All right, so we're talking about weather. We could keep going. Space weather. All right, we have sensors up in space. A lot of them are, simple cameras. Of course, they're not going to see down through a cloud. Different radars, they're going to have different accuracies, and all depending on the type of weather that's happening down there. We certainly rely on the satellites for weather information. I think our guest will probably touch on that just a little bit. The more and more technology that we have up there that can tell us the weather, we've gotten pretty darn good about being able to do our forecasting and all, especially as technology has gotten better. But anywhere from sunspots to different things that can disrupt our electrical grid, to our eyes and ears that we have out there, our safety, all of this is dependent on weather. All right, so we get to, let's think about the first Gulf War for a minute. I brought a very high-tech visual aid to help out with this for a second. So, laser-guided bombs first started off in the Vietnam War. So airplane could drop it, and a laser spot literally is pulsed laser energy that can actually be coded, so you can have different codes for different things that a bomb can look at, and it's going to fly to hit that spot. The very first precision weapon we had was laser guided. Okay, well actually it was television guided, the Nazis started it, but okay, the first ones we were using were laser guided. But here's the point. The laser has to see the ground the entire time. It has to have clear line of sight all the way through the clouds. The bomb that you drop has to see the laser spot on the ground also. And I say that separately because if you think about it, all right, here's the high tech. I've got a spot on the ground, right? I drop a bomb from up here. The bomb's going towards the ground. Well, the airplane's going to fly over here, so it has to have clear weather on this angle, yet the bomb's still coming from over here. And it has to see it the entire time on the way down. Well, if you're going to drop from 20,000 feet, how often do you have clear weather from 20,000 feet in a large spot over a target area that you're going to be able to have the luxury to do that? Well, in Iraq and Afghanistan, more in Iraq and Afghanistan, weather for the most part is pretty darn good, comparatively, not always. And once again, I think our guest is going to talk about that. But when we look around the world, that becomes a really big issue, all right? Because we talk about the Middle East, which has relatively good weather. It's why, by the way, that's why we do pilot training down in Arizona. Because there's so many days of the year that you can fly without having to worry about weather. And when you're practicing in the military to go to the bombing range, you can have good weather. Trouble is, it conditions our pilots and our military that, oh, this is if you're going to practice, you're used to having good weather. Well, what is the real weather in Michigan compared to Arizona? What is the real weather in the South China Sea compared to Arizona? You know, we can go on and on with the examples, but the reality is where we're going to most likely end up in a condition we're having to use our military, it's not going to be in a sunny, clear place on average. So let's go over and just give a couple examples. And I know, once again, Rich could probably do a lot better job. But just in the South China Sea, if you know what's going on and all the stuff there, if there was to be a battle, 144 days a year it rains. All right? There's clouds, rains, and things that are going on there. Do you think weather's going to be a factor if we ever get into a conflict in the South China Sea? Let's move it up to Taiwan. All right? The capital of Taiwan, 219 days a year. More than half the days, it's raining. All right? So, you know, I'm not even trying to explain cloud decks and everything, but it's going to be even worse than that when we talk about, are we going to be able to use old school laser guided bombs? We've developed new technology. We have JDAMs now. They go off of GPS coordinates. They don't care about weather. You can drop them. Here's the trouble. You can drop them on coordinates, but what if the target moves? Uh-oh. Well, it's going to hit where you told it to go, and it doesn't know any different. Now we've started combining a lot of these technologies in the newer weapons where we can drop it on a coordinate, and it's going to look, and at some point you're going to be able to do an update to it. But we're trying to get the best of both worlds with the munitions nowadays so we can have all-weather type of munitions to go after moving and dynamic targets. And you're starting to see how complex and difficult this could end up being. World War II, I kind of already talked about it. It took, you know, even though we had numerical superiority, it took over 2 years from the time we jumped into the fight to actually have what we would now call air superiority over Germany. And a lot of it had to do with terrible weather. You remember the movies, Battle of the Bulge, okay? When you see that and what happened, we couldn't use close air support. We couldn't supply our troops. We couldn't do a lot because it was crappy weather. When we finally got a break in the weather, we were able to do stuff, and the battles very quickly changed in our favor. We just had the 81st anniversary of D-Day. If you know D-Day, remember Band of Brothers? At one point, the famous scene where the guy gets up and he goes, "Gentlemen, no jump today." And they all go, "Oh," and they have to go wait for 24 hours to try it again the next day because the weather was crappy. What they did is, it was bad weather, but there was a small gap. And they said, okay, we're going to hit that gap. June 6th is going to be that period of time where we're going to exploit it. The Germans didn't have as good of weather forecasting capability, and they had no idea there was going to be a gap. They were kind of relaxed because they weren't too worried about the weather at that point because they had cloud cover. Our more accurate weather allowed us to have the advantage to get more things started on D-Day itself. This is how weather plays into what we do, why we do. There you go, once again, words that just show exactly what I was talking about. The Berlin airlift. So after the Second World War, now we're into this place where we're trying to keep a city alive by an air bridge. They had a day that they called Black Friday. It was very bad weather. They didn't have a lot of good procedures in place. And we crashed, I think it was 6 or 7 airplanes that day. And through the course of the operation, more than 100 people lost their lives, almost all due to weather. Okay, flying airplanes in weather. And a lot of the procedures that we use in the United States today have their roots back into what we learned from the Berlin airlift. The instrument flight rules that our airplanes use today, that's where we learned a lot of things. There's a wonderful dude, you should look him up sometime, last name Tunner, that came up with a lot of those procedures. And like I said, we have weather satellites that are up there. They're aging, they need to be replaced. The technology is pretty cool as how we're able to do some of the great things that we can do right now. But once again, the infrastructure takes a lot of resources to be able to make that happen. Why is it important to the Air and Space Forces? I hope that I'm doing a great job of leading into this discussion for our wonderful guest speaker that we have coming up. Oh, sorry, two more things real quick. You know, this is not an academic lesson, but how can weather degrade the bad guys? And here's a list of how can weather help the good guys. And you can I'm just going to let you read through that list here just a little bit, but you can see this is more than just, can I take off and land today? There is so much to the atmosphere, to weather, to what we do, and why it's important to both our air and space forces. You done taking your picture, Ron? All right. One more. So, leading into the direct experience of our guest speaker today in the first Gulf War, Buster Glosson, if you didn't meet him, very big guy, didn't have opinions about anything, I say sarcastically, but he wanted weather 48 hours out to know when they did their air tasking order planning cycle. This is, okay, we're going to send these airplanes against these targets, against these munitions, and it took 48 hours to plan that ahead of time. How accurate was the weather forecasting then versus how accurate is it now? And the result was, in the first Gulf War, the F-117, the stealth, showing the picture of right over here, read the stat, more than half of their sorties not effective. They did not put the bombs on the target because of weather. Then our near favorite here, the A-10s. Okay, in the first 2 days, they only flew 75 out of 200 planned close air support sorties because the weather sucked. So how effective were we at employing air power because of weather and the forecasting limitations that we had? All right. And you can go to Hollywood, by the way. This is not new stuff. That's actually a movie from 2011. Okay, you can go look that up later if you want. Or more importantly, there you go. From 1954, they show some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. pulling the levers, adjusting the weather. And I didn't even talk about manipulating weather, seeding clouds or anything else, but there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of talk out there about manipulating, actively making weather happen or not happen. And that's a whole other discussion topic we can get into. But that being said, if you really want to know what's going on with weather, download the Fox 2 app. Tune in to Fox 2 Weather, and you can get this guy as we lead into Rich Luterman. Come on up here, our guest speaker for the day who's going to talk about weather.
I'm going to start at the beginning, and then we'll go through, and by all means ask questions. I love it when people ask questions. I'm Rich Luterman. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, born and raised. I studied meteorology at Penn State University. I went through the ROTC program. I got my commission in 1988. I was a green second lieutenant when I got my commission. And I got sent to Griffiths Air Force Base in upstate New York, near Rome, New York, Syracuse area. And I was a young weather officer. You know, it's amazing how little I knew when I came out of Penn State about the world of weather, how little I knew. But I got to a big Air Force base, and we had a 24-hour weather station. And I worked with these wonderful people who really highlighted for me the world of weather. And how little I knew out of Penn State was astonishing. So now I'm a young weather officer at a big Air Force base. We had B-52s, we had KC-135s. New York Air National Guard had A-10s back in the day over in Syracuse. And so we did weather round the clock, 24 hours a day. Now what is that? What is that? What's happening? Oh, it's a picture. Oh, I see. Oh. You know what? One thing I'm not is a technologist. I'm not. I mean, I'm a weather guy, but I'm not a technologist with like cell phones and computers. I still go to the library. I mean, that's amazing. So now Desert Storm rolls around, and I'm in New York State, and my boss walks in, because we had sent some of our weather people over into the theater One went to Spain, one went to the Azores, one went to Turkey. So I walk in that morning. This was after Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and my boss, Major Mike Hooford, a great guy, he says, "We got another tasking order." And I'm like, "Oh, that's tough. This is October." And he goes, "It's you." And I said, "Me?" We had 3 weather officers at my Air Force base. We had the boss, we had the one who worked with the bombers and the tankers, and then we had me. I worked with the NORAD people. We had a big NORAD section, and we had forecasting responsibility for many sites across the Northeast, including Selfridge. We forecast the weather for Duluth, Minnesota, the fighters there, for Selfridge, for Niagara Falls, the old F4s, for Burlington, Vermont, for Loring Air Force Base, Cape Cod, Atlantic City. It was really a thrill. So I got sent to the desert. So now I'm in the desert leading a 9-person weather team. I'm the officer in charge. Growing up in Pittsburgh, serving in central New York State, I knew so little about Middle Eastern weather. It's a whole world of weather on another side of the world. If any of us would pick up and move to Alaska or Colorado, it takes time to get used to the weather patterns in a different part of the country. So before I left for the desert, I got all the technical manuals about forecasting weather for the desert, and I remember studying them all night, reading sandstorms. I never saw a sandstorm in my life. When I was in the desert, I saw sandstorms. Something else in the desert that you may not intuitively think about. Yeah, it was hot. I was at Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates. I was there for 4 months, and then I got sent to Riyadh for 2 months. So yeah, it's hot. There were days at 110, 112 degrees. It was hot. But what I remember most is about being cold in the desert. At night in the desert, it gets incredibly cold. So you're out there working in the day, it's 100 degrees, you're sweating, it's hot, you go get a shower, and then I'm laying in my tent, in my hooch, and I'm freezing at night because it drops down into the 70s or 60s, and you say, well, that doesn't sound too bad, and it's not. But when it's 110 in the daytime, 65 is pretty cold at night. So it's interesting, the weather, I remember being cold in Desert Storm. It's pretty, it was cold. Desert Storm was a whole experience. Well, we're going to get back to that. Then I got back to New York State. I got an offer to interview at West Point for a teaching job at West Point to teach weather.
To Army.
Yeah, to Army. So there are Air Force weather people at West Point who teach the cadets basic meteorology. So I went
to do it then with 1-syllable words. That's tough.
Well, you got to keep it simple. You got to keep it simple for Army. So I went to West Point and I interviewed with all these generals, and they're all educators, but these were like decorated officers. It was a thrill, And then while all this is happening, I meet people in television. So they make me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I'd just been promoted captain. I met these people in television. They said, why don't you get out of the service, if you can, and we'll put you on TV. This was all back in 1993. You have to make a decision in life. I was on active duty a little more than 4 years. I had this opportunity to go in TV. It wasn't my life dream to be a TV guy. It really wasn't. I got out of the service. It was during the Clinton years. They were looking for people to voluntarily separate because they were drawing down the numbers. I raised my hand. They said, you're out. I was out like in 45 days. I was out completely. So now I'm in television. Have any of you been in front of a live camera before? Live camera? Live camera? Yeah, it's challenging. So now I'm in front of a live television camera in Utica, New York. One of my first weeks in television. I'm in front of the camera, the green screen. You know what the whole green screen thing? So in the old days, we used to wear microphones that would be tucked in our belt and trail us. So as we walked in the world of the green screen, we had a wire that was behind us. So on this one day, the wire came out of my belt. So in front of a live camera, I have this wire draped all over me. So as the camera's rolling, I'm talking about high pressure and low pressure in central New York, and I'm sticking the wire back in my pants. Now, when I'm in front of a green screen and a camera, I'm all alone. there's nobody there. There's not even a camera operator there. It's me and the camera. So as I'm doing all of this jazz, I don't even think what it looks like to the viewer at home. I couldn't even imagine. So then the news ends at 6:30. The phones are ringing. You know, what's with the new weather guy? You know, this is a new experience, you know. That was my
You're
trial.
showing your age with the camera.
Oh, yeah. That was my trial by fire in front of a live camera. That was a lesson learned. 4 years, I got hired by the good people at Fox 2. I've been here 28 years. I've been on Channel 2 28 years now. Oh, God bless you. That's actually nice. You know, when Huell, Perkins, and Monica Gale retired a couple of years ago, they were like the elder statesmen of Fox 2. So now that they retired, Dina Centofanti and we're now the elder statesmen of Fox 2 television. Dina got hired about 6 months before I did. So now I'm like one of the old guys. It's strange, you know. It's strange seeing all the young people come up and doing their thing. It is what it is. It is what it is. What I did in the military is a lot different from what I do today. You know, today I get up in front of the camera, partly cloudy, partly sunny, chance of showers, what's the Father's Day forecast, 4th of July. You know, how many days will the weather affect our lives to a great degree? I mean, I know for some of you boaters on Lake St. Clair, it's a big deal. It is a big deal. But life-threatening weather here in Michigan doesn't happen all that often. It really doesn't. Although, 4 weeks ago, we had all the tornadoes. Remember the sirens going off at 1 o'clock in the morning? That was a busy night for me and for Alan Longstreet because we worked through it. Thankfully, nothing really bad happened that night. But when I was a young officer in the Air Force, standing in briefing rooms, especially over in the desert, staring at pilots who in a matter of hours were going to be shot at in anger, it was a whole different ballgame. It was a whole different feeling. I'll never forget that. So far, so good. I got some stories now. You want to hear the real deal stories? I got real deal stories. In the history of the human experience, weather has played such a role. You know, you mentioned D-Day, General. That was a great example of how weather affected the course of history. Also, when the B-29s were flying their early missions against Japan, they encountered the jet stream. They didn't even know the jet stream existed up there, this river of winds at 30 and 40,000 feet. So as these bombers were flying toward Japan, on some of these missions, they weren't making it there and back because the jet stream winds were such that they were pushing. They were flying into a headwind, and there were times when the B-29s had to turn back well before reaching their targets. So modern meteorology started during World War II because of all these applications of weather in day-to-day operations. I read a terrific book just recently, terrific book, about how all of the Pacific landings were affected by tides. So when you're landing on beaches at Peleliu, at Iwo Jima, Okinawa, all the little islands in between, the countless little islands, a big deal was when to hit at high tide. Because if you hit the beaches at low tide, you're sitting ducks out there. So, I don't have the name of the book, I could get it for you. It's a great book about this woman, oceanographer. She was a scientist at Woods Hole in Massachusetts, but she was the global expert on tides, on all of these remote locations in the Pacific. Fascinating. And of course, with the tides, you need good weather. If you land in crappy weather, bad things can happen. And it happened many, many, many times. During Desert Storm, it was a big deal about seeing the target. Seeing the target. We have munitions that can see through the clouds in a sense, but back then, they wanted to see the target. We have satellites in orbit, and the early weather satellites were put up in the 1960s. There are polar orbiting satellites flying at relatively low orbits, and what they're looking for is holes in the clouds. So planners want to know when the weather will be good, so we have satellites in orbit right now, taking pictures of the Earth right now, looking for holes in the clouds, so the reconnaissance satellites can see the ground. It's really remarkable technology. I mean, how it has come from the days of World War II, you know, when it was just send the airplanes up, get them there. It's remarkable, remarkable how it's progressed. In the world of the Army, artillery is affected by the winds. You put something up there, a ballistic shell that's going to travel 2 miles, 8 miles, 15 miles, the weather is moving that shell. There's no way around it. The wind pushes the munitions wherever the wind goes. The great battles of World War I, weather, Jutland, and the list goes on and on and on. All the great battles of the Mediterranean, it was weather. You know, seeing the target, these great naval battles where they were shooting at each other at these incredible ranges, 10, 15, even 20 miles. I mean, think about the Navy. So a ship is moving, firing at another ship that is moving. As they shoot the shell is moving, and the wind is pushing the shell. It's really remarkable that over a 20-mile space, they can put a shell on target. I mean, you ever think about that? It's not done by luck. It's not done by luck. It's done by understanding your guns and understanding how the guns work and the weather therein thereof. It is unbelievable. Questions so far? Any questions? Any questions?
I'll add one other thing.
I love it.
For a gun, like what you were just talking about, add one more complicating factor. So if it rains, it's going to cool the gun from the top, but not the bottom, which metal, of course, expands and contracts, actually bends the barrel of the gun. So that's why you'll see a lot of gun barrels, you know, especially in the Army, that are wrapped nowadays so that thermal, it all plays into this very complicated equation of sensors and computers.
I'll stick with the partly cloudy stuff. You know, I'm off today. Today's my day off. Tomorrow's my day off. Father's Day, Sunday, I'll be back at work doing the weather, you know. It's going to get warmer next week. I think, you know, we had a warm day Wednesday. It was pretty warm Wednesday, breezy and warm. People always want to know the forecast. I would be remiss of my duties if I didn't give you the forecast. It's going to get warm next week, but it's been pretty quiet so far in terms of storms and severe weather season. You know, June is our month here in Southeast Michigan. June is our month. So far we did have those active storms 4 Thursday nights ago, but since then, quiet.
So we want to shoot a shell 20 miles at our adversary this weekend or wait till next week?
This weekend. Weather's going to be good this weekend. Yeah, I mean, it's pleasant out there today. It's going to be nice and comfortable. Tomorrow's going to be maybe a spotty shower, but it starts to warm up Sunday, and then next week, warmer and more active.
Calm down the winds, though.
Oh, the winds. Yeah. Winds. I mean,
The wind is ridiculous.
I
We
mean,
have heat, but it's always going to be windy.
It messes up my hair all the time.
I mean, think about the wind and the forecast that is involved with wind, you know, and the Navy, and the Air Force, and the Marines, and the landings. It goes on and on and on. Yes?
Have you found your weather forecast is affected by the fewer weather balloons going up?
That's a very good point.
Because that would affect the military as well.
Yes, so even in this day and age of science and technology and computers and AI, the weather community still sends up balloons twice a day all across the world. Obviously, we send them up in the United States, but all across the world twice a day at 0Z, at 12Z, that's military time. 8 in the morning, 8 in the evening, the balloons go up. Where it's done around here is at White Lake Township. So that's where the National Weather Service office is in Southeast Michigan, up in White Lake. So, with all that's going on in politics in the world, there are less balloons going up now than there were a year ago. And how does that affect forecasting? That's a great question, actually. And the answer is to a small degree, because of airplanes that fly that take temperatures and wind measurements at altitude. As they go up, as they come down, airplanes are sending back this valuable data to automated stations. So the world keeps turning. So there is a handful less balloons going up in the United States than there were a year ago. It's not making any big difference. It's not. It's a very good question, though. There's so much data being collected.
I guess I didn't really, I've been married to him for 21 years.
Him?
Yeah.
He is him.
But he volunteered me to coach my daughter in whether or not meteorology in 5th grade, because he knows a lot about it. So I had to learn a lot about it, but I never really, he talks about it like he knows what he's saying, so I believe him. But I never really put all the weather factors together, but with the military specifically.
It's really remarkable how weather has its tentacles in just about everything the military does. Navy, Army, Marines, Coast Guard, the ships, weather. We're doing actually a story this coming fall at Fox 2 about the Edmund Fitzgerald. We all know the story. That's a 50-year anniversary coming up with the Edmund Fitzgerald. 50 years. That was 1975. Yes, it's a gut-wrenching story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's a gut-wrenching story. And we're going to tell part of that story this fall. But, in the Gordon Lightfoot song, if they had just put 10 more miles onto their voyage, they would have safely made it to Whitefish Bay, and it wouldn't have been a story. It would have been just another ship caught in a storm that came through okay. But history proves that, it's a harsh reality, history. Many, many, many times over. We're going to show a few pictures. And I'm going to narrate of what you're seeing. Now, General, what do I do here? Right-click. That's young Lieutenant Luterman at Griffiths Air Force Base. That is Greg Dillon, who was a civilian forecast. He was prior Air Force. I was very green. I'm wearing the BDU, but I was very green in that picture. This is middle of 1989. This is Desert Storm. The gentleman on the left, Mike Hogan, I still talk to Mike. He lives down near Altoona, Pennsylvania. And Mike and I still talk, and we text each other. But there I am. This is Al Dhafra Air Base in Abu Dhabi, near Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates during Desert Storm. This is also Griffiths Air Force Base. There's another civilian forecaster, Bob Crossland. He was a Navy weather guy who made the jump into DoD weather. And that's just a day in the life at a weather station at a big Air Force base. A lot going on, a lot going on. Now, this is the old radar that we used at our Air Force base. This is the FPS 77. There it is. This guy right here, he knows. He was an Air Force weather guy. So we had our own radar at the Air Force base, and it had a range of about 120 miles. So as military aircraft would fly over our airspace, which happened frequently, they would call us on our air-to-ground radio, and they would ask for weather updates. Where the storms were the lake effect snow bands. And so we had a phone there, and we could talk to the aircraft as they were flying in real time about what we saw on the radar. Very, very powerful tool. This, again, is Desert Storm. Why we're in civilian clothes is we lived at Al Dhafra, and then we drove up to Abu Dhabi Airport, and they wanted us to drive in civilian clothes for obvious reasons. So there were times when the boss, we dealt with Air National Guard KC-135s from Rickenbacker and from Chicago O'Hare. I'm going to tell you another story of Desert Storm. So at Al Dhafra Air Base, it was F-16s. It was 3 squadrons from Shaw Air Force Base and 1 squadron from Hahn in Germany. So these are all hardcore, regular Air Force guys. All the maintenance, all the logistics, the munitions. These were regular Air Force. Where I worked it was all National Guard guys. But we all lived together in the same compound. So regular Air Force guys are a little more hardcore versus National Guard guys who are a little more relaxed. So the Guard guys would wear their Chicago Cubs baseball caps, and there was this tension that existed between the regular Air Force and the Guard guys. So we worked with Guard guys, so the Guard guys would say, you're weather guys, stay in your civilian clothes. It was nice, staying in civilian clothes. It was nice. There we are. That was
You
our...
mix right in with the population, by the way.
You fit right in. So that's a good look from our weather station. That's at Abu Dhabi Airport, and that's all of our KC-135s. Those are E-models, the old E-models from Rickenbacker and from Chicago Air. They were great guys. There's a little humor in that picture, you know. We're weather guys, you know, so I had a pair of scissors there. You know, that was how I was going to defend myself. But we ran a 24-hour weather station. You can see the maps behind, and we got all the charts. And these National Guard guys, they really appreciate it. That's where I lived for 4 months of my life. We call that a hooch. So I lived in that door right there, and I had a little window. And my roommate was an Air Force attorney. Because you think that wherever there are active duty military people, there are going to be people that have legal problems. It goes with the territory, you know, legal problems back home, in whatever. So my roommate was an Air Force attorney. He was a very good guy. And that was our tent city. We lived in a tent city. It was eye-opening, you know, to go from a big Air Force base in New York State to a big tent city in the middle of the desert. We had a post office. There is our post office tent. We got our mail. You know, one of the things that affected morale in the desert, there were two things. Taking a shower every day is critical to morale, critical. And also getting mail every day. So our mail flight was a C-130 that came in around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That was the mail flight. It came from Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. So there were times when mail got pushed because it was lower priority. If they had to bring in spare parts, important spare parts, then the mail would get bumped. And that happened, but there would be a grumpiness the next morning when we were eating breakfast. When people didn't get their mail, and when people couldn't take a shower, the grumpiness went up big time. Is that incredible? I know some of you are active duty and have military backgrounds. I think what I'm saying resonates. I think you know what I'm talking about.
This is Air Force first world kind of problems.
Yeah. And that was our dining hall. It says Shifting Sand Dining Hall. That's where we ate twice a day. They had 2 hot meals, one in the morning, one in the evening. Lunch was usually sandwiches, but that was our dining tent. And here is a picture of me, second lieutenant, back in Griffiths Air Force Base. That's Pat May on the right, Mike Shaw on the left. These were smart, terrific guys. I still talk to Pat May. He's now a proud grandfather. And then there's Lieutenant Luterman. You see in the background the radar tower? So this is at Al Dhafra Air Base. And there was an old weather radar there. It didn't work. It was inoperable. So there was a weather radar at our base. It just never worked. So hey, that's just the way it is. And this is when we were breaking down the weather station. We were getting ready to move on to go home to clean up. Where I was at Al Dhafra, at one point we had about 5,500 men and women in the base. It was huge, a huge tent city. And then all the airplanes went. They went back to South Carolina, they went back to Germany. So then we were left, those of us, to clean up. And so when I left this base, there was about 300 left. So it went from a tent city of 5,500 to 300. And it kind of got spooky, you know, because you're walking around and there's nobody around. You know what I'm talking about? When you get used to people being around, and all of a sudden there's nobody around, it's a little freaky, you know, so we got out of here. That was cleaning up that. And then this, again, is one of the guard pilots. This, we used to stay in civilian clothes some days.
Got an Italian Air Force badge on.
Well, in Al Dhafra, the tornadoes, the Italian tornadoes were it. So they swapped the patches.
But that's an Italian Air Force patch.
I know, I think they swapped patches. He's a guard guy. These are guard guys, you
I
know?
understand.
That's a good call. That's a good pickup, baby. I see it now. And then this is very recent. I'm in the middle there, and that is what I'm going to tell you his name. Joe Salvia. He's Milford. I think he's VFW in Milford. He's one of the organizers for the Veterans Parade down in Corktown. So they ask me to go every year, and every year I am honored to go. I'm a proud veteran. I'm a proud member of the Air Force Association. So when they ask me to show up, I show up and I do it with a smile on my face. I have a quick story for you. You want to hear a quick story? Now I'm going to wrap it up. Unless there's any questions. You have any questions at all? Any questions? Okay. Yes?
How far out can you predict the weather accurately?
That's a good question. How far out can we predict the weather accurately? So the answer to that question is, if you watch Channel 4, Channel 7, they only go out 2 or 3 days with accuracy. If you watch Channel 2, we go out about 7 or 8 days. You know what the answer is? With modern meteorology, we have a good feel for the weather about 4 or 5 days out. People want to see that 7-day forecast, so we give it to them. They want to see a 7-day forecast, we'll give it to you. But the accuracy beyond 4 or 5 days really starts to fall off. Does that make sense? So, now there are some days, obviously, when we say a chance of showers or spotty storms in the afternoon, and then nothing happens. Nothing happens. But 4 or 5 days, that's a very good question, actually. And that number is getting bigger. You know, with all the modern techniques and the computer modeling, we're getting further and further out there with accuracy. That's a very good question. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
So the technology you've seen change over the years. I remember Sonny Elliott
Oh, yes.
and his funny terms that he put together.
I got to know Sonny. When I got hired, the radio station was at our TV station. I used to see Sonny in the hallways. And he was a real character. Sonny was a character. You know, he was shot down in World War II. He was a POW. And so he had real stories. And there was one time, I remember the day, and Sonny said to me, Luterman, you know, I get all these requests to make these appearances, and I'm getting too old for this crap, so I'm going to give all of my contacts to you. So now they're not going to call me, says Sonny Elliott, they're going to call you. So I've picked up the baton where Sonny gave it to me years and years ago. I enjoyed talking to Sonny. I got to know Sonny. He was a pilot as well. He flew his own airplane. Small, you know, private. Sonny Elliott, that's a real character right there.
Yeah.
Just him writing on the board.
Oh, his shticks and his spiels. Oh, Sonny was great. He was great. Yes.
Yeah, Rich, I've noticed over the last number of years down in Florida at various times, it just seems like the winds just keep getting more and more and more frequent. And of course everybody goes, oh, it's global warming, global warming. In your community of weather forecasters, what is all of your take on the state of what, is it global warming, is it not, is it just a shifting?
It's a great question.
What do you think?
We, as human beings, we have affected the natural order of things. We have. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have affected the natural order of things. But the question is, to what degree? Is it to the 2nd degree, to the 10th degree? That's a matter of debate. And that debate will go on. You know, rising ocean levels, warmer summers, colder winters, more snow, less snow, more hurricanes, stronger hurricanes. It's all a matter of debate, and it's all politicized. I mean, the truth is somewhere in all of it. What is the truth? I have no idea. I have no idea. And that's not really a good thing. It'd be nice if the powers that be, if the scientists that be, could come to a consensus and say, here's the truth. The truth gets lost. Does that make sense? The truth gets lost.
Earth's been around a long time.
It's been around a long time. Any other questions? Yes?
So this question is probably for you and
Oh, yes.
So in the future, it looks like wars are going to be fought with drones. Does weather take a deal with those? And can radar detect those?
Yes and yes. Yeah, I mean, we just did a story a couple of days ago about the Taylor Fire Department, Police Department. They have these drones. So when they get a call in Taylor, whether it's an accident, on the road, whatever, they can take their drone off and it can be anywhere in Taylor in like 90 seconds. And they can get aerial shots of whatever the call was. I mean, just think about that technology. I mean, for so many years it would take someone, a police officer in a squad car, to get the call, respond, drive to the location. Now the drone flies. But they talked about it being visible on radar. So it has a transponder on these drones. So as it's flying over Taylor, Metro Airport knows it's up there. Because the last thing you would want is some kind of collision. I mean, that's the last thing. So, I mean, where does it go from here, General? With all the drone stuff, I always think about how exposed we are. I mean, if a bad guy and a drone really wanted to do something bad, it could be done.
Oh, absolutely.
It could be done.
Yes, and we had, if you were here, gosh, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, whatever, when we had the guy came in and talked about drones and everything. But some of the videos and stuff that we showed with the Chinese putting the thousands of drones up there, and we've seen attacks and everything like that that have happened in the Middle East and Ukraine, etc. I said you can have these very sophisticated defense systems. Let's say you have a Patriot thing and you have 21 missiles. If they send 22 drones, guess who's going to win? But you are also right that it is affected by weather. Radar capabilities. We have radars that see birds. So just to let you know, we can tweak radars that can detect damn near anything that's up there. But commercial drones that are flown in accordance with the law have the transponder, type of information and are tracked. There's an app you can download on your phone to see them. It's not that sophisticated. But that's the trouble right now is they're cheap, they're numerous, and they can very easily overwhelm a defense system. The first time they showed that video in Korea for the Olympics way back when, and the drones are dancing and showing the Olympic rings and the lights and everything else, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this is being controlled by a laptop computer by a dude sitting right here. Imagine that in a military application. By the weather, because he said they go up and they see. Well, guess what? If there's clouds and all that, they won't. If the wind's too strong, drones are little and light. They're going to get blown around, etc. So they can fly through the clouds off the data link and all that. I'm guessing it's probably illegal for them to fly through the clouds because they can't see and avoid. That's the rules for that. But yeah, the bottom line is it is a big issue going forward, and it is a huge threat, and they're looking at lots of different ways to try and counter that threat other than big expensive things that we've been using in the past.
That's a great question, really. That's a great question. I'm going to leave you with this. I'm a reader. I'm an old-fashioned reader. I still go to the library. I read my books. So one of the stories that has really resonated with me through the years is a story that I read about the first American expedition on Mount Everest, 1963. And weather played a big role in it. So it's just a short little story. I'm just going to read you an excerpt. I'll give you a little background. So mountaineers have been trying to climb Mount Everest since the 1920s. George Mallory, that's the famous name of Everest exploration, a British Everester who died up high on the mountain in the mid-1920s. So in the 20s and the 30s, not so much in the 40s, because during the war it was all closed. But finally in 1953, the British put a man on top. Edmund Hillary was the first man on top of Mount Everest as a part of a large British operation. He and his climbing partner, Tenzing Norgay, have the famous picture, of Tenzing standing on top of Mount Everest. And people wonder, well, where's Hillary? Yeah, he took the picture. So there is no picture of Ed Hillary standing at the top of Mount Everest. There is no picture. It doesn't exist. But he took the picture of Hillary. He took the picture of Tenzing. It's fascinating. So then a couple years later, the Swiss climbed Mount Everest successfully. Then in 1960, the Chinese, it has never been confirmed. They say they got a man on top, but there's never been any proof, 1960. So finally it's 1963, and the Americans are going to make their attempt at Mount Everest, 10 years after the British success. So, you know, this is back in a time where logistically it took a year of planning to get to Mount Everest with all your equipment. It took a month to get from Kathmandu to the base of the mountain. It took a month, then all the acclimatizing to finally be in a position to put some climbers up on top. So, sure enough, early in the expedition, the weather is bad, so they're waiting. Then finally the weather is good. They move up the mountain, and the young American climber is killed. The young American climber is killed in an avalanche. This is all true. So then they retreat off the mountain. What are we going to do? You know, is this worth someone's life? And a decision is made to keep on going. So Norman Durenfurth, he was the expedition leader, says, no, we're going. We're going back up. And in a short amount of time, Ed Whittaker becomes the first American on the summit of Everest, Ed Whittaker. He, along with his climbing partner, Nalwang Gambu, an Indian climber, they're up there. The one thing that Ed Whittaker does, he puts a U.S. flag on the summit of Everest. And there's a picture. I don't have the picture, but there is a picture of the U.S. flag sitting, resting, planted in the ground on the top of Mount Everest. So then the climbers retreat down to base camp, and now Norman Durenfurth makes a decision to put more climbers up on the summit. Now, they're weeks into the expedition, and I'm going to read you the passage from the book. The book is called, I gotta get my glasses. Isn't that terrible? I can't see anything without my glasses. Are any of you in the same boat? Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. So the book is one of my favorite books of all time. It's called Americans on Everest, 1964, by James Ramsey Ullman. Very accomplished author. So that's the background. So here's the excerpt out of the book. So it says, two men were moving now where two men had moved 3 weeks earlier. Luke Jerstad and Barry Bishop were among the smallest men on the expedition. Luke was normally 5'8" and 155 pounds. Barry, a stocky 5'7" and 165 pounds. Both Americans had lost about 20 pounds in their enormous effort on the mountain, and they were haggard and they were depleted. Moving up the last reaches of Everest, each was, as Big Jim Whittaker had described himself earlier, a fragile human being. The slope was steep, and they moved even more slowly than before. Now it was 1 step, 7 breaths, 1 step, 7 breaths, lifting a foot, placing it, lifting and placing. Their feet were no longer made of flesh and blood, but of lead. Their bodies, aching for oxygen, were things they were dragging with them. Behind their goggles, their eyes were glazed with weariness and by the gleaming, unearthly brilliance of snow and sky. Quote, but if we had to crawl the rest of the way on hands and knees, said Barry Bishop, we were going to get there. On the final flank of the world's tallest mountain, they climbed with their heads down, but suddenly there was something ahead. The rope joining Barry and Luke had gone slack, and it took Barry a few more minutes to join his partner. They were side by side, looking up at the snowy ridge, and just ahead there was a white dome, a white crest to the mountain to which something had been added. It was something that brought a lift to their hearts and tears to their eyes. There was Old Glory, wrapped once or twice around the pole that Big Jim had planted 3 weeks earlier. It was not ripped or shredded, only slightly tattered along its edges. There, on the apex of the mountain, the colors of red, white, and blue streamed out above the summit. Almost a month earlier, Luke, looking up at Everest, had written in his diary, "Comes a moment of truth when I feel like a little boy, humbled before this huge mountain, knowing I am in the wrong place. But now, there he was, he and Barry on his top. It was 3:30 in the afternoon when arm in arm they stepped up together. They embraced, but they did not speak. Luke later wrote, "We saw each other, but could not see. We felt each other, but did not feel. We discovered the strength and dignity which man's soul is capable of." I always thought that's a good story. That's a true story about the first Americans on Everest, and it was weather driven. You know, weather presented this great challenge, and yet they were successful in putting climbers on the summit. So that's my spiel. Any last questions? Yeah, please.
For like the climbers, how fast does the weather change for those guys climbing the mountain?
That's a great question.
Minute?
I mean, storms come on these great summits of the earth, including Denali. I actually know someone who's been on a couple of expeditions up at Mount McKinley in Alaska. It's something I would never consider. I've done some day climbing in my life. You know, I've been up to 14,000 feet once, and that was plenty. But it's dangerous all by itself. Without weather, it's dangerous
Right.
business. So then you put a storm or high winds or desperately cold temperatures, and you add layer upon layer of danger. So, any mountain climbers in here? Any mountain climbers? Any last questions before I sit? Anything at all? General, thanks for having me. I mean it. Thanks for having me this morning.
Real quick, you know, we do have a little tradition here and everything we like to give out.
It's not money.
You're not going to reuse it.
Should have prepped this ahead of time. But our standard gift, the 810 bullet with the Michigan AFA logo and all, as we call it, our big damn bullet. It's a great discussion piece.
Thank you. Thank you
When
very
anybody
much.
asks you what the weather is, you can say it's partly cloudy with a chance of pouring.
Thank you, General. Thank you for having me. Enjoy. It's going to be a nice weekend. You'll see. You'll see. Enjoy it. You'll see. You'll see.
You know where you work.
One last quick question, just because you know he's telling the stories. The difference between the Guard and active duty. So I was active duty during the first Gulf War. So I was one of those, I don't remember what you called them, but definitely different cultures. Pilot training. I'm flying around the country. I remember I was in Colorado. I think it was at Buckley at the time. And I'm in a flight planning room getting ready, and this was with a T-38 with my instructor. And at the time, we had these cards we had to fill out with pencils, with you know, spinning a little computer thing and everything else. You had to figure out on your flight, headings, distances, winds, talk to the weatherman, do all this. And I mean, it took an hour at least going through all this. Well, there's a squadron of A7s from the Guard that are there deployed, and they all start walking in and everything else. And at one point, there's probably 20 or 30 of them in the room. And finally, the squadron commander walks up to me, you know, young lieutenant in pilot training. He goes, "What are you doing, Lieutenant?" I said, "I'm flight planning, sir." He looks at it and he goes, points to one of his new lieutenants in the squadron and goes, "Get up here, Lieutenant so-and-so." He goes, "Yes, sir." He goes, "We're flight planning for our flight leg. Can we make it where we're going to go?" He takes his flight cap out and holds it up against the map and goes, "We can make it, sir." And he goes, "All right, good, let's go." But that was their flight planning was. They could go the length of a hat. So yes, a little bit different culture and everything there. But Rich, thank you for taking the time and talking with us. And hopefully, once again, giving you something to think about. Weather. Who thought that it would be such a huge impact on air and space operations? So hopefully you walk away with a little more of an appreciation, a little more of a thirst for knowledge of what goes on in the air and why that's important. That being said, next month, Leah Volker, Colonel Leah Volker, who's out at Selfridge with the Air Refueling Group, is going to be our guest speaker. Back in here for a breakfast next month. Appreciate you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day and the weekend.